Lions still have some money to go get a cornerback, but should they sign any of these guys?
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And here we go, everybody. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Matt Dery with you on a Friday, March the 22nd, into the weekend, and Saturday, March the 23rd. Thanks for making us your first listen and checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, you can find us on Twitter at Dery Speaks, at Locked On Lions on Twitter, Matt Dery Facebook fan page. And of course, thank you for subscribing and watching us for free on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel. The program today is brought to you by our very good friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Coming up on the program today, our friends at the SideLion report highlighted 5 cornerbacks that could be available for the Lions to sign, or are available for the Lions to sign right now in free agency. And I got to be honest with you, after looking at that list and reading through PFF, I'm not real thrilled. Alim McNeill speaks. He was on the Green Light podcast with Chris Long. I want to play you some audio from that, which is really telling about one of his teammates. A note on Cinderella, and also taking a look at the roster. We've talked about needs for the Lions: cornerback, another receiver, an edge, another interior defensive lineman. Could there be another need for the Lions to maybe look at in the draft? We will get into that right here on this Friday edition of Locked On Lions. Shout out going to our everydayers who check out the podcast each and every day. We appreciate you. A lot of our everydayers on Twitter last night caught this mistake that I made. I had loaded in the podcast before heading down to Wayne State to do the Motor City Cruise game last night, and I put in the wrong day's podcast on the audio side. So many of you hit me up on Twitter. You know who you are. Hey, can't get the podcast. Really appreciate you guys doing that, so that when I got home last night, we fixed the audio problem. But you can get the show each and every day on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts on the audio side, Apple, Google, Spotify, and all of that. So we appreciate you. All right. First and foremost, always read up. Pride of Detroit, Lions Wire, SideLion Report, all the different sites. Of course, all the beat writers each and every day just to get ready for the show. And I came across an article by Brad Berriman at SideLionReport.com about 5 free agent cornerbacks the Detroit Lions could sign to replace Cam Sutton. Of course, if you missed yesterday's show, the Lions made it official. Cam Sutton gone, released, let go by the team. I mean, we're sitting here on over 2 weeks now with this arrest warrant out for him down in Florida on domestic violence and battery on a female, and he still has not turned himself in. No one knows where he is. Pretty scary. But the Lions need to add another cornerback, of course, because they've got, a decent amount of corners right now. Of course, Brian Branch, the newly signed Carlton Davis, or traded for Carlton Davis. Emmanuel Mosley's coming back. Amik Robertson is on the roster right now. Khalil Dorsey, Stephon Gilmore. The Lions need another cornerback. And I was reading this piece at SideLion Report, and I wasn't really thrilled with these names. Now, this has nothing to do with Brad or the website. They do a great job. But they gave out some names. So the first name was Adarius Jackson, who was really, really bad last year for the Giants. PFF grade was like 48.6. Kind of undersized, is a really good return man. But if I had to choose somebody to go out and for the Lions to sign, Adarius Jackson is not that guy. Another name they mentioned is free agent Trey Herndon. Last 2 years with the Jaguars, so he has some familiarity with Deshae Townsend, who, of course, is the Lions' new secondary coach. Limited role last year, just started 4 games, and had a 71.4 coverage grade from PFF. But again, more of a depth piece, not somebody that I would trust putting on the field, but does have ties to Deshae Townsend, because they worked together in Jacksonville. Steven Nelson is another name that they brought up. Nelson is 31 years old. He's been around, played last year with the Houston Texans, high degree of man coverage, all right, and not a bad football player. He's played a lot of snaps in his career, 1,100 snaps last year in 17 regular season games, 12 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. Pretty decent tackler. But again, he's fine. Like none of these names are jumping out. Those are the 3 so far. Then they were going down from 5 to 1. So their number 2 name is Ahkello Witherspoon. Played last year for the Rams, and of course 2 years before that in Pittsburgh. Played in all 17 games last year for the Rams, 3 interceptions, 14 pass breakups, 48.1% completion rate allowed. Big guy, 6'2", 195. But I watched him in Pittsburgh and he did nothing. He was fine. He's okay. He's a body. The one guy that I do like, and I know this is not a surprise and it's number 1 on the list, is Stefan Gilmore. 2 years ago in Indianapolis, Stefan Gilmore was awesome for the Colts. Young Colts team. They were going through a lot with Frank Reich and everything else. It was not a good season for them a couple of years ago. Then they went on, of course, and drafted Anthony Richardson and all that. But Stefan Gilmore is still available. There were reports this week that he was open to going back to New England, where, of course, he was a Pro Bowl player and all-pro player. He is a little bit older, was Defensive Player of the Year with the Patriots in 2019, and he's going to be 34 years of age. Last year with the Cowboys, 55.8 completion rate allowed. That's really good. 2 interceptions, 13 PBUs, 72.3 coverage grade from PFF. The thing I like about Stefan Gilmore or over any of these other guys is, number 1, he's a winner. Stefan Gilmore is a winner. And yes, he's 34. Yes, his younger brother, Steven, is on the Lions already. I would love that. I would spend the money to go get Stefan Gilmore over Witherspoon or Nelson or any of these others. And you have to figure that Brad Holmes, now that Cam Sutton is not available anymore and they're letting him go, and he's, when the police and the authorities find him, he's going to jail. They need another body. They could draft a corner at 29. All right. The Locked On mock draft and everything was completed last night. I'm not going to give it away, but cornerback could be on the docket for 29 for the Lions. They're going to take best available because that's what Brad Holmes does. But Stefan Gilmore can still play. And everywhere he goes, he wins. He's a winning player. He's 34, but he knows how to do it. He knows how to play the position. And you bring him into Detroit, I think he'd be a great fit. I think he'd be a veteran presence, a leader. Not that Steven Nelson, who's 3 years younger with Houston, wasn't a decent football player, but Gilmore to me moves the needle. As a guy that would come in and not care if he's not on the field every snap, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a year ago. So those are 5 guys that are intriguing. Thanks to the SideLion report for throwing that out. None of them move the needle for me except Gilmore. I mean, Witherspoon, the Lions picked on him when they played the Rams in the playoffs. Nelson's all right, but, Gilmore to me would be the guy that I would go get. You can do a 1-year deal. We're now at the point in free agency where these guys are going to take a 1-year deal. Stefan Gilmore is 34. How much longer is he going to play? It's the fit for this organization that I totally see. So we'll see if that is something that could come to fruition with this football team. You bring him in, and he's with his brother too. You got to figure that Stephon Gilmore would like that. Now, Stephon Gilmore should get more of an opportunity this year. That was a guy that had a tremendous preseason last year, made the team, was on the active roster, and was never activated the whole season. Was always deactivated at 11:30 on Sunday mornings. All right, coming up next, Alim McNeill was on the Green Light podcast with Chris Long and raved about one of his teammates. And I thought this was really, really cool. We'll tell you who coming up next right here on a Friday, Locked On Lions. And this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're thinking about therapy, thinking about talking to somebody, thinking about usage of your time, all right? What's the first thing you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? All right, go on a run, take a nap. There's a lot of things you would want to do. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. But the question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? Best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. And therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking about starting up therapy, here's my suggestion, all right? Give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and it suits your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, so you rarely hear a lot of interviews with Alim McNeill. Really good guy, great in the room, all of those things. But you don't hear a ton of long form interviews with the Lions defensive tackle. Well, the Green Light podcast with Chris Long is a really good show. And they had Alim McNeill on, I believe it was this morning or yesterday. And a lot of good stuff. Says he's got Dan Campbell's back 100%. Talking about, how he got into the league and all these things. But one of the things that Alim McNeill was asked about and talked about was his teammate, Aiden Hutchinson, who, of course, he plays with along that defensive line. And I want you to take a listen to this audio of Alim talking about Hutch because it's phenomenal. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that has the immense amount of respect of his teammates and of a fellow defensive lineman. Take a listen to Alim McNeill right here on the Green Light podcast, talking about Aiden Hutchinson. It's awesome.
And that sort of thing. What was the first thing you noticed about Aiden, your first impression when he walked in there, 2 years ago, and kind of he just rolled, it seemed like.
Bruh, you couldn't have told me Aiden came out of college straight. Really? You would have just thought he came from another NFL team. Like, it was crazy. It was crazy. I can't lie to you. The first time I ever was on the field with him, practice with him, like a real practice, it was just that. Like, he just got straight to it. And he hasn't stopped ever since. I've never seen nothing like it in my life. I can't lie. He came to practice that first practice and got straight to it.
Yeah.
That's all he works. That's all he do is work.
Yeah. Work.
And it rubs off on everybody else, too. Everybody else feels that energy. Everybody else is, hey, let's get some work in. Let's do extra stuff after practice. Like, it's good. It's good.
So he's kind of that standard setter.
Yeah, we were trying to get that way. Adding Aiden in allowed us to be able to, complete and reach that standard for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, he's pushing people. Now we got Pascal pushing people, Kaminsky pushing people, everybody.
I like Kaminsky.
Yeah, absolutely.
He can
absolutely.
Play. He can play.
Kaminsky, really, man, he's the guy in that room. He's that guy for us.
Yeah.
I really, really like John. So.
All right, there you go. There was Alim McNeill talking about Aiden Hutchinson, then brought up John Kaminsky at the end. Of course, John Kaminsky is going to come back to the Lions again on a pay cut. Another guy that, of course, did that. A couple guys last year, a couple guys, John Kaminsky so far this year. I love that. I absolutely love that. Did you hear what Alim McNeill was saying about Aiden Hutchinson? He came into the league. He came into the Lions, and it was like he was not a rookie. It was almost like he came in from another NFL team. That's the kind of impact that he made right away. And you think about this, Brad Holmes a couple years ago could have taken Kayvon Thibodeau at 2, could have taken other players. Trayvon Walker, of course, went number 1. Hutch, you just kind of knew based on local boy, based on ticket sales, based on Michigan, that there would be outside pressure or even inside pressure within the organization to take the golden boy. And he's done nothing in 2 years but live up to the hype and more. All right. The sacks are going to come. right? He's going to eventually be a 12, 13, 14 sack guy a year. But he made the Pro Bowl this year. You know, he's a dominant player at times. The motor's always there. And you hear a teammate like Alim say, listen, he came in right away and said, and Kyle Long or Chris Long said it. So he's the tone setter. And he's like, yeah, he is. And you don't get that normally from players in their first and second seasons. So when we sit here and talk about, well, the Lions might be too young to win or to go far, or, you know, do they have enough talent? All these things, and Dan Campbell and the culture. But you got to have the right fit. You got to have the right players. You got to have talent, and you have to have the right guys with the right mindset. And this is a guy in year 1 and 2 playing alongside players that have been around longer. Charles Harris was around longer. Romeo Okwara was around longer. Kaminsky's been in the league longer than Aiden. Right? Tyson Oluwalu, guys like that were veteran players. And yet it was Hutch saying, let's stay after and work on things. Let's do drills after practice. He's a winning player. The Lions have never had a guy like this. Or maybe you got to go back to players like Chris Spielman with those 90s teams and just say trendsetter, tone setter, all of that. And, you know, sometimes I know Aiden gets picked on a little bit sometimes because the expectations are so high. Oh, he didn't have any sacks in this game, or he's got a sackless streak of 3 games, right? Remember that this year? But there's little things that we don't know about that Alim just shared on that podcast, Alim McNeill, that just, thank God he's on our team. Those are the kind of players that Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell have wanted to build this around. And they're lucky that Jacksonville didn't take him number 1. No, that's not to say Trayvon Walker's not a good player, or maybe he's going to be more of a high-impact guy. But the Lions, he fell to them, and they did it right. Sure, Kayvon Thibodeau had more sacks. Yes, we've talked about it on this podcast. But those are the kind of guys you win with, man. And I love hearing Alim McNeill talk about his teammates like that. And then at the end, mentioning Kaminsky and saying Kaminsky's the vocal guy. John Kaminsky had a fantastic year 2 years ago in the role that he played as that inside-outside defensive lineman. This past year, John Kaminsky did not play as well. Taking a pay cut to stay. Would have counted $5 million against the cap this season. Now it's been sliced in half because he wants to win. He likes to lead. And yeah, you got to have talent. All right. I'll take maybe a semi-bad seed if he's really talented. But in that locker room, to have guys like Kaminsky, Hutch, Alim, it's awesome. It's a winning culture, man. Speaking of a winning culture, Cinderella, locally here, unbelievable story last night that took place as Oakland University knocked off Kentucky in the NCAA tournament. Couple of things. Number one, shame on Oakland University for how they treated Eric Pogue, their soccer coach. I can't let that go. Shame on them. Number two, college and I know that I'm riffing here about a different topic for 1 second here on Locked On Lions, but calling them Cinderella, like, college basketball is changing. I hope you're seeing this because it's getting worse, unfortunately. Like, imagine in the NFL if the entire roster just changed after 1 year and everybody decided to leave. Now, Kentucky, John Calipari's been choking for years and underachieving for years, but like, my whole point is Cinderella, which Oakland has been called numerous times the last 24 hours, but these guys have all played together. These guys have grown together. A guy like Trey Townsend has been with the team for years, and it's just refreshing. And these mid-majors that have players that are juniors and seniors that have grown up in the program and have not transferred and have not hit the portal might not be Cinderellas. Oakland has as good a chance as anybody to make the Sweet 16. Now they're playing NC State. NC State's red hot. That was a team that was on the bubble before the ACC tournament. So happy for those kids, Townsend and Golke and these guys. It's a pretty cool story. So those kids deserve a ton of credit. All right. Coming up next, Is there another position on the Lions roster that we've not talked about at all that we need to address? We can do that coming up next, right here on Locked on Lions. Folks, NCAA tournament is here. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, and that is FanDuel. Right now, new customers, brand new customers, get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is put in a $5 bet, and if it wins, no matter what it is, money line, spread, whatever, you get $200 free in bonus bets. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. You can still do that. For those of you that had Kentucky, sorry. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, so we've talked about it, and I don't think this is going to happen at 29, but we've talked a lot about needs for the Lions on this podcast. We're here every single day right here on Locked On Lions. Thanks for making us your first listen, Lions fans. All right, you look around the depth chart, all right, you say, are there enough edge rushers on this team? Kaminsky, Davenport, Hutch, Pascal, James Houston, Matthew Betts, the kid they signed from the CFL. Will he make it? All right, you can make an argument they could look for another edge rusher. All right. Interior defensive lineman. Reeder and McNeill are the guys. But what about Onwuzurike? Is Pascal an interior guy or outside? What about Kaminsky? All right. Broderick Martin, of course, 3rd round pick last year that barely played. That's a question mark. Cornerback, we touched on earlier. Wide receiver. As of right now, Josh Reynolds is not a Lion. Jamison Williams, Khalif Raymond, Amon-Ra, DPJ, and Antoine Green. Could the Lions upgrade there? Sure, absolutely. What a safety. We know that CJ Gardner-Johnson is gone. Ife Melifonwu is really coming on, playing well. Kirby Joseph is your starter at free safety, entering his 3rd season. Very good football player. But do you realize that looking right now at the Lions, let's see if they call it the safety room. It's Melifonwu. That's it. I don't even know who Brandon Joseph is. Okay. The Lions would they take a safety at 29 to be a backup to Ife and Kirby Joseph? No, I don't see that happening. But keep an eye on when people want to talk about the safety market, that the Lions could be in on it, because that is a position that we haven't really, talked about as far as depth. Lions have had guys in the past. Lions have had good depth, before when it's come to safety, and a lot of guys that have moved in and out from special teams and have been special teams aces and everything else. But it's a position to keep an eye on. I love what Melifonwu has done for this franchise. He has stepped up his game in a big way, so much so that really CJ Gardner-Johnson became expendable, and the Lions really have not did not really miss him all that much last year, because Melifonwu was coming off the edge, blitzing. He was making plays in the pass game. Kirby Joseph, we know, plays a very good center field and is a guy that the team relies on. But what if one of those guys went down? Are they going to bring back Brady Breeze? Are they going to, do something like that? CJ Moore, who was busted for performance-enhancing drugs last year. Is there a veteran that they could look at? It's possible. But very, very intrigued, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get to round 3, we get to round 4 in the upcoming draft, and a safety is taken, or a hybrid, somebody like a Brian Branch, who Ife Melifonwu, if you remember, was a cornerback in college at Syracuse, and has become a very good, strong safety for this franchise. So we've talked about receiver. We've talked about the need at corner. We've talked about the need at edge and interior D lineman. And again, Brad Holmes is going to take the best available player. But if you're talking about a need and depth piece, the Lions are going to need to add a safety at some point, whether it's a late free agent or in the draft. So keep an eye on that. Another great week here on Locked On Lions. I'm off Monday. We will have a show and be back on Tuesday right here on Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. Checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. Shout out to one of our everydayers, Chris Druin, won a big award for Sandler sales. Shout out to a CD. He's not Lions free anymore. Lions free Chris Druin. Shout out to him on the Locked On Podcast Network.